Here you can go into your profile, and here you can enable the tours if you still want to see them or not. So in this case I'm going to disable them because I don't want to disturb the videos. But if you want to enable them, you can simply do it here again. While we're at it, here you can see your first name, last name, but also username, and enter a lot of information. And this is actually important step, is here you can define the capacity, or let's say availability, for you as a user. If you have 8 hours a day, you can simply leave it at this. If you have a 4-week cycle, you could technically, for example, put this on 0 and press update. Or you could go to a 2-weekly setup and still have the 8 hours, or maybe here the 0 because every second Friday you're off. You could also increase this to 9, or depending, of course, on the actual working hours. So in this case I will just use a simple setup, a 2-week setup for 8 hours every day. Right, let's go back to planning. So we can see here that I'm available now as a resource, but we need to do it for other resources. So the ones that you want to actually plan or want to give access to Proxuma, you can give them a license, because if they don't have a license, you will not see them in the resource screen. So you can simply add a license, and here you will see what it will impact on your monthly amount. In this case, I will confirm it, and it will automatically assign the license and then the security level. Please note that this user will not get an invite to Proxuma. If you want that, you need to do it manually right here. If you would upgrade the license, we will confirm with you again, then your monthly commitment will be changed. Of course, during the trial nothing will be built, but if you don't touch this anymore and you convert it to a paid subscription, this is the actual licenses that will be used. So in this case I'm going to give these people a license. This one I don't need to send, but give them a license. I do want to invite both Max and Melissa, so I send an invitation, and I do it the same here. As you can see, it will now be pending and they will be invited to the tool. Going back to planning, you now see those resources added and you can plan them. But before planning, it's wise to set up a lot more stuff. So we did the users. Now let's go to settings. Right here you will have a lot of settings that are pre-filled that will most likely be suited for you. If not, you can change it. Maybe you have multiple locations that you want to use in Proxuma, or let me rephrase it, maybe you have a certain location that you want to use in Proxuma, because right now you can select one. You can say which is the first day of the week, your date and time formats, and your time zone. Here you can set up your office hours and extended hours. This is pulled from Autotask, so if this is incorrect, you can change it here, but it will be changed in Autotask itself. So you can basically set it up, but please note it will sync back to Autotask. If you don't want it on a certain location, you can use another location as your main location here in Proxuma. Then we have some defaults. If you don't want to use a specific area, you can hide, for example, line of business, or maybe you don't want to see the event type or item type in front of the card. I will show you that later, but in this case, if you don't want to see it, you can hide it. Eventually you will get used to it, so I would recommend to keep it on now, but later you can definitely hide it. If you're not using skills, you can also hide it, and nodes probably you will use them, but you could hide them if you want to. The next one is about outside office hours planning. Um, we recommend you to keep this setting that it is allowed, but we give you a notification. If you don't want that notification, just want to allow it, you simply put it on this setting. Then this part is about, let's call it automation, small automation. So when you are planning a task, you're doing that with a service call. But if you want that specific task to automatically get a new status, then you want to change it here. So you can, for example, put it on planned. Same thing for when planning a ticket. Again, you plan a ticket with a service call, but this will change the ticket status and task status. And this is a status for the service call itself, and I would recommend keeping it new, or maybe if you have a custom status, you can choose that one. If you're planning something and or you're creating a task, you can define a default work type. Most of the time you just want to have keep current. So you want to set it up like this, that you're not changing a work type, but in some cases it might be relevant for you to do it. Then we have the durations. These durations are about planning items, so in this case service calls. So if you're planning a task, you can set up the default duration. In this case, I want to keep it 4 hours because I usually plan tasks on 4-hour intervals. For tickets, I will put it on 2 because that is how I plan it. And then the service call duration is a different type, I would say. Let me explain it a little bit. So when you're planning a task, you have a one-on-one relationship between a task and a service call. If you're planning a ticket, you have a one-on-one relationship between a ticket and a service call. So that one is straightforward. But this one is, you can relate more than one item to a service call. You can even mix related items to the service call between tasks and tickets. So this is about when you have more than one item related to that specific service call. It can be 2 tickets, can be 2 tasks, but can also be 1 task, 1 ticket, or even more. And that's when this one comes in, and you can also define it right here. And in this case I will put it on 2 hours and I press update. Then this part is really important. This part is used in Proxuma, but also for your appointment classifications, which I will get back to when we touch the Outlook integration, this part. But here you need to define your time off requests. So which kind of time offs do you have? For example, you have a national holiday, you might have vacation, and you might have absence. And if you want to, you can even add more. For example, if you want to even specify absence more, like maybe someone's sick, you can do it here. For time, that is everything else. So for example, it can be a meeting, it can be lunch, it can be travel time, but basically anything else that you would want to. So you can add those here, and it is important that you add those here because these events you can create in Proxuma itself, but you can also use these to classify appointments as if they were such a request. And that is important because right here on the capacity settings, you should be able to choose if you want to subtract any planned item based on this type from your available capacity. I have to press update in order for me to show it, or you can refresh it, but in this case I need to define here which things should reduct from your capacity. Now, for the service call statuses you can choose I think everything, but maybe if you have a specific cancelled status or another status that you don't want to include in capacity, then you should uncheck it. The same thing for here, you can define if you want all of these or all of these to be reducted from the capacity or not. In this case, I'd recommend you just to keep both of them enabled, and here you can define if you want to subtract all of these from your available capacity. In this case, I do want it, but maybe you would have some kind of other event type, or maybe non-capacity. I have to press update again, and maybe these ones you don't want to include, but that's all up to you. So I updated again, so that's what I did. And now your basic setup is almost finished. You have a few more tabs. Single sign-on, I will get back to it later. Auto task we just did. That's this part. If you want to update it, you could do it here. But please note that if you're updating auto task, that you should always make sure that the client ID is referring to, as basically keeping it the same client ID. You can freely change the secret if you want to for security purposes, but please don't change this. If you do change it, then the entire sync will restart. So basically we delete everything and then sync again. Then on the view, nothing spectacular, but you can choose which default tabs are opened. This is mostly used for new users that are invited to Proxuma, because eventually you will set up a view yourself and that will be the default that will be opened. But in this case, I would recommend putting it on resource tab on week level and project tab on the month. But of course it is up to you. And here also about the extended hours. Outlook I will get back to later. For the licenses, these are all the licenses that we will provide by default, and the security levels have a one-on-one match because these are system created, but you can choose your own security levels, meaning you can reduce the permissions for certain users compared to the license defaults. And here you can set up a default license for everybody that is going to be connected through Autotask. So if you want everybody to have an engineering license, you can do it simply by choosing it here. I don't recommend it for now unless you are very certain that everybody needs a specific license. We will update this in the near future to have a more granular approach where you can choose the default license based on, for example, department or security level. Alright, let's go further into the security levels. Let's say we have a company admin that, because you want to assign this license to, let's say, 5 users, but you don't want everyone to have access to all of it. So you can add your own security level and, for example, call it company admin less permissions. I would recommend that you specify which permissions are excluded, and you can mark it as default. What this does is if you ever assign a company admin license to someone, then the new security level that you're creating here will be added as the default security level. In this case, I'm not going to do it, but you could definitely do it. So here you need to select which pages on the left side you can, or on the top they can access. But for example, you don't want certain users to see the logs, or you want, for example, to reduce specific areas. So here you need to select everything they can do, but you, for example, you don't want this that they can edit the organizational profile. They could see it, but they cannot edit it. That's how you do it. And here I recommend you to just simply allow everything if they're a company admin, because else they should not be a company admin. They should have other permissions. Same thing for here, and same thing for this one. Here you could, for example, not allow, for example, the Outlook settings or license settings or SSO settings or Autotask settings, whatever, right? So you couldn't, for example, reduce the permissions here. Maybe also you don't want them to edit the subscription, but they could, for example, view it. And same thing, for example, with users, they could maybe only view and activate or deactivate, but don't edit, or maybe only not create. And then you simply press save, and now it is here and you can use it. In this case, I did not set it as default because I still want this as default, but you can reduce the permissions. Alright, so we have done a lot of setting up. In this case, the basics are done and we can go to the next integration, Outlook.